Chris Fernari here for Brewbound.com, and we're hanging out at the Baxter Brewery here in Lewiston, Maine, and we're with President and Founder Luke Livingston. Luke,
thanks for coming.
Thank you for joining me
Absolutely.
on camera today.
My pleasure.
So you guys launched just over a year ago now.
It was January of 2011, so yeah, a year and a half, year and 8 months. Yep.
And you guys came out of the gates pretty hot. You last year were, I think, one of the fastest new breweries to ever start up in terms of barrelage volume.
Yeah, we brewed just over 5,000 barrels of beer in our first year of business.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about sort of your strategy out of the gates, how you initially went to market with only 2 styles of beer and really sort of tested the waters with that.
In terms of strategy, it's been interesting because I think Baxter as an entity has really kind of taken on a mind of its own. I try and steer the ship as best I can, but a lot of our success, I think, has just been very grassroots. We did start with two styles of beer, and our Stowaway IPA, which is a big 7% West Coast style IPA, and then Pomola Extra Pale Ale, which is we call it an extra pale ale. It's more of a golden or a cream ale, but it's extremely sessionable, drinkable, sub 5%. And we chose those 2 styles pretty much by taking a look at the landscape of beer in Maine and what I felt at the time on a larger scale was really lacking from beer in Maine and northern New England.
So, I mean, from an outsider's perspective, I mean, it would seem like entering the marketplace with only 2 styles initially was a very successful approach to the business. You see so many craft brewers say, hey, we're here, and we got 15 different experimental things that we're trying. What do you think was sort of the key to your success when saying, all right, we're only going to do Stowaway, we're only going to do Pomola?
Yeah, and I think you do see that a lot with startups trying to make as much as they can, as many different beers as they can to kind of see what sticks. And while I understand that approach, to me it was much more like, let's put something out there that's very manageable and perfect it and really kick its ass before we move on to something else. And make sure that we can replicate the same beer every time and really carve out a niche in the market for those 2 beers. And then when we introduce subsequent beers, either another year-round beer like we did with our Amber Road, which we released in November, or now our seasonals that we've gotten into this summer, those styles can really sort of are carried on the backs of our first 2 beers, and we know that we've got some successful kick-ass brands, and now it affords us the ability to start playing around a bit more.
Now, you see a lot of brewers start off on a small system. I mean, you guys went for it right from the very beginning. How do you go about financing a large-scale project?
Yeah, I mean, our initial project cost about $1.3, $1.4 million. We're blessed to have very reliable financing right out of the gate, and I initially met with everybody in Maine and New Hampshire who would take my phone call, begging them for money, and in the end, as is often the case, the money, most of it ended up coming from a longtime family friend who I'd known since I was 7 years old. He's a good friend of my parents, and had a real stake in revitalizing Lewiston Auburn, and had made certainly enough money for himself that he really he thought a brewery would be fun. So I got very lucky in that regard. And then from there, with sort of his blessing, I was able to secure additional bank financing through a line of credit. We work with People's United Bank, and the city of Lewiston's actually pretty heavily involved as well. Some other private debt financing as well.
So you mentioned just over 5,000 barrels out of the first year. What are we looking at for 2012?
2012, we expect to end up brewing a little over 8,000 barrels of beer.
Okay.
And we've just started the early planning stages of our next expansion. I don't yet know exactly what it's going to look like, but we do hope to have some more tanks online over the winter and for first quarter of next year, and really hit 2013 with a bang.
So for you, is Baxter a brand that can travel? Can Baxter move from Massachusetts and Maine and even New Hampshire and Vermont and start moving west?
I hope so. You know, I think my long-term vision of the company is certainly East Coast distribution up and down the eastern seaboard, if not a little bit west as well. I've tried to, and hopefully am succeeding, define a brand or build an identity to the company that honors our main identity with some of our imagery, the Pomola logo, the Baxter name, but also doesn't tie us down to Maine. I've tried to, for each individual beer that we make, not only make different and exciting beers themselves, the liquid, but also tried to create a separate identity or brand for each individual beer too that hopefully travels beyond Maine or northern New England.
Well, I mean, I think you guys have definitely burst onto the scene and established yourselves as you know, a key player, at least in, you know, a small regional player in the New England area. Yeah. And I think that the brand definitely has the ability to travel well.
Thank you.
So wish you the best of luck.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers.